So, Martin, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you in the context of the upcoming Miami Digital Art Week, where we are presenting a solo show with you. It's actually also a new thing for LaCollection as we are partnering with objects on the matter. And so, in that context, I wanted to start and ask you a couple of questions regarding yourself as an artist, but also the specific works that we will be showing. So, let's
Yeah,
start.
very exciting to be here.
Thank you. And let's start with a very classical but very useful question. How did you become an artist?
Well, like everybody, I started obviously as a child, but I guess from a professional trajectory, it started a little bit later. I started when I was like 14 years old in design agencies, first print, then online, started to have my own, and then I moved on to study basically media management and ended up for quite a while in aviation. And after aviation, I went basically back to university, which brought me then to Canada. And that's really when I was kind of reassessing and wanted to bring art really back into the center of my life, and started more than 10 years ago working as a painter, mostly in digital, or in physical works, but with geometric abstraction and clear defined elements to explore. And yeah, about 6-7 years ago, I fell into the crypto rabbit hole and started really exploring digital art more intentionally. And it's been a wild ride since.
Great, thank you for a great intro. And in order to jump directly in the topic of the solo show we're showing, I wanted to go back to a curation that I did with Fanny Lacoubet on the topic of art and currency, in which you were a part of. And I wanted to know, how does this topic, this recurring topic of art and currency, resonate for you in the current context?
Yeah, I think, for me, time is an essential part of my art, right? I have a lot of very time-intensive art processes. Time plays, a tremendous role in the meanings and in the way I work. And currency for me was always just, some sort of form of exchange of time, right? We would find a mean to exchange each other's time to get things we cannot produce and things like that. As such, it was just, you know, culturally something super important and interesting how it developed across time. But it's also interesting to explore it as a medium itself. And from that angle, exploring the world of cryptocurrencies and this new form of ways of transact and exchange time, I think for me it became apparent that, with all these advantages and opportunities, there's also like big threats, right? Like we see the threat of like central bank issue digital currencies to kind of weaponize currencies maybe against us. We saw social experiments, in the European Union with negative interest rates already, where basically people couldn't decide when your currency might disappear or expire. So if we just play that idea a little bit forward, central banks could basically determine with whom we can transact. They could give us an expiry date on transactions. So, I think these are like all threats which are not very conscientious in our mind because we still have some sort of like faith in our institutions. But I think for me, really the negative interest rate experiment, and that was an experiment which lasted almost 10 years, was some sort of like dipping their toes in what can be done with currency in a way, to stimulate markets, but also to kind of manipulate or oppress people, right? Because you work yourself, you pay your taxes, and then somebody decides, what, you're not allowed to save. We want you to participate actively in the economy. So it's kind of like goes against some of these ethos of the whole cryptocurrencies with the rights to of self-sovereignty and things like that. And I think for me, that context became extremely interesting and worth exploring.
Yes, and actually, what is very strong in your art is that the history of crypto and its evolution, that was actually tremendous in the past years, is actually almost embedded in your art. And that leads me to my next question, is that what is the role of education on that topic in your practice?
Yeah, I think still people have like a very, very vague idea what cryptocurrencies really are. They don't, and I think it's going to be crucial in future for inclusion to understand some sort of basically what the blockchain, really the technology behind cryptocurrencies is. For me, it was always like one of the three big accelerators of our time, right? I see like artificial intelligence, digitalization, and blockchain, like as the three which will transform some sort of our society. And the more we know about them and the more we kind of participate with them or understand them, the easier it will be for future inclusion, right? Because a lot of white collar workers, I think, jobs will transform in this, building block transformation. It's not just, what we saw in the industrialization, where it was very simple task which changed. No, it's going to be part of our life. And I think in that meaning, most of my art had some sort of educational twist to bring people into the subject matter in a way which is very comfortable. And I think art, has a lot of meanings. But for me, it was always, some sort of like capturing what is going on in our time, but also using it as a tool to lure people and educate them about the technology. And I think art is so beautiful because it can achieve that on several levels, right? You can have just this visual level, which might lure you in and you feel attracted to it, but then you can really peel it off like an onion and explore the deeper levels and what it actually means and overcome some of the complexity this technology offers.
Yeah, it's exactly what I feel in front of your works, notably in Linz, for instance. This educational side is really making people learn something of what's happening historically and economically, which is quite, I think, differentiating in your DNA as an artist.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I think,
yeah, right.
No, go ahead.
And to add to that, I wanted to discuss specifically as well, and then we can speak again about the education, because in both of them, we can also find that part. But I wanted to, yes, to discuss the works you are presenting in Miami. So we have the Cloud Wallet series, and we also have your new piece titled From Grassroots to Loot. And so, yes, if we can maybe start with the Cloud Wallet series, can you tell me more about its origin and what you wanted to achieve with it?
Sure. So the Cloud Wallet series is basically a series which plays the idea of digital wallets, where they come from, what they are, and what they can become. It's a combination. The visual part of this series is basically a continuation of the series I was working for over 20 years on, and which is kind of like a geometrical play. But let's go maybe through the pieces one by one. The first one is, and they're really consecutively created. So the first one is kind of constructed emptiness. And the idea was here, okay, what is a digital wallet and what is the misconception around it? Because, a digital wallet holds basically nothing. And that's something which a lot of people don't understand, is that a wallet really is just some sort of reference point and holds a right to transact, but actually never carries any sort of digital asset in itself. That's why you can, for instance, restore it. And constructed emptiness really plays with the idea, okay, it's kind of like a folded shape, a folded three-flap wallet, empty as a cloud, and is basically the first element to it. The second element is ascension, and ascension revolves around the idea, okay, what is a digital wallet becoming? And I think here it's interesting to see how, for instance, the emergence of the metaverse created some sort of urge or request for interoperability. So a digital wallet become an identity. People were using their digital wallets, to identify themselves across different marketplaces, across the metaverse, and it became not only something which was seemingly pseudo-anonymous, but it became really some sort of as really like a digital identity. And I think for me, the most recent example of how it can become is really just like how we kind of become inclined to use, for instance, like these domains, right? ETH domains or TES domains or Bitcoin domains, but really even attribute our names to these digital wallets with profile pictures and so on. And then the third piece is basically looking further from where we are now and what it can become. And I think it's called casting shadows, is because it really plays around the idea of this pseudo-anonymity in the space. People still think, it's anonymous because we're working with alphanumerical hashes, but reality is it's very, very easy to track. It's very, very easy to follow all the transaction because it's a permanent ledger, right? So from the very beginning of the issuance of cryptocurrencies until today, we can trace back all the transactions which ever existed, and governments and tax authorities are employing thousands of very smart people and artificial intelligence to be able to attribute all these wallets and transactions back to actually physical people. And one of them very recent example infamously was, for instance, Michael Buhana, right, who created anonymously this digital wallet to create a meme coin in the context of this banana auction. But very quickly, people find out who he is. And I think there's going to be some sort of repercussions because, it also challenges one's ethics if we look on it.
Yes, I guess anonymity is something quite key in the market, and a lot of people want to keep that power, at least to keep the secrecy. But in the same time, art is always an area. I mean, I think crypto art or traditional art, where provenance is so important that keeping anonymity for so long is not super helpful in the same time. So I feel there is this, this kind of like that debate, like the value of anonymity. No, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, if we look at the origins, and I think for me, the origins are, or at least the value base of our space lies really in the cypherpunks. And the cypherpunks for me, were like cryptographers who really understood very early that with all this trend, with all this shift with the internet and digitalization, we are going to be subject of extreme surveillance and abuse of these transparencies. And I think, one of these rights, this right for privacy, is something which we too voluntarily want to give up everywhere. And I think, it's a two-sided sword, right? Because I think if you're a people or a person of the public or work in a role or, as an artist, like I prefer to be public because I want people to give them the comfort that, I created these pieces and, it's kind of like I have nothing to hide, right? But at the same time, I totally respect if artists don't want to give away who they are. And some do that also very successfully until today. And I think that is the beauty about this value base of the cypherpunks, that we can have the right to choose if we want it to be or not to be. And I think a lot of institutions and a lot of basically companies are really trying to take this change or choice away from us.
Yeah, you're right. So let's hope the space will fight to keep it as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm not very optimistic. I think back then when Bitcoin really emerged in the groups of the cypherpunk, for them it wasn't as radical enough. They thought like, okay, this is a good start, but it's still too easy to trace back identities and too easy to kind of censor or repercuss. So I wonder, is there going to be maybe a 2.0 or something coming up in the future?
Let's see. It's a debate, I think. Yeah, that's not solved yet.
No.
But then if we go back to your second artwork for Miami, so we will show this trio, the series of three called the Claude Wallet series that you just presented. And we will also show a new work that you've done this year that is titled From Grassroots to Tilute, and that is very well describing what we're experiencing right now. So I will let you tell us more about what it is and what it means for you.
Yeah, sure. Maybe just a little paraphrase, or I don't know if you want to capture that question later on, but just for context, the work with clouds for me has, aside from all these technical references, which we might dive in a little bit later, but has also this very strong personal side where, you know, as a digital nomad, if you want, I lived already in 3 countries and moved over 34 times by now in my life. So I never actually lived longer than about a year and 2 months in the same place. For me, clouds became some sort of constants in my life, right? A constant in my life, while basically the physical space would change, the sky would basically be often with me. And that's another, I think, important component to this Cloud Wallet series, because talking about digital identities, it explores the subject of identity itself. With that being said, the new piece, From Grassroots to Tilutes, really originated in a talk I gave at NFC Lisbon last year about how the Web3 renaissance is yet to come. So in a nutshell, really it's about that the space kind of celebrates itself, you know, of having achieved so many things of like decentralization and democratization. But in reality, what we have seen over the past few years in this prolonged bear market is that we kind of reverted to its origin. So we basically returned to the things we actually wanted to change. And this is mostly driven with the influx of venture capital, right? So this piece From Grassroots to Tilute really was striving to picture with one simple visual, and that was really the transformation from this grassroots movement into some sort of commercial corporate structure with venture capital depicted here in these, you know, cloud-like fonts as a scissor in trimming the space into conformity and really initiating elements which I think are extremely in opposition to what this space was about. You know, we see consolidation, we see the replacement of open protocols for corporate, you know, or nation state regulations where people are like excluded again. And I think that is something which is very important to realize is, you know, that all this consolidation, all this regulation is really moving us away from where we actually wanted to be. And with that piece, I tried to put a little bit of a humorful twist to it.
Yes, I found this work actually very humoristic, but also connecting very much to the importance of skies that you were mentioning before for the cloud wallets. I mean, skies and clouds, and also the connection with spirituality. And that was my last question. We see it with the cloud wallets as well. It functions a bit like a trinity, and we have to tell people that the sound with that piece is very important. It's a choir, so you have to put the sound on to experience the work in the best way possible. And basically, I think this connection between what you said about living in the cloud, somehow having a form of home there, having a base in the skies, and this connection with spirituality is also something that maybe people see less, because the economy in your practice is also very much, you know, radical and very direct. This part is a bit more hidden, but nevertheless, I think it's a very important part. So can you maybe dig deeper a bit on that topic of skies and spirituality?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was, you know, painting and I discovered cryptocurrencies, I was looking for a theme which would capture basically everything the space represents for me. And I think when I fell onto clouds as a symbol. And that was interestingly by accident, because I was experimenting with generative art. I was, and this is where it nicely connects, I was using basically seed phrase words, visualizations, and seed phrase words are basically the passwords of a digital wallet. And when I was visualizing these seed phrase words, basically a cloud formed. And I thought like, wow, this is really it. This is meant to be, and this is going to be my symbol, because it has so many interesting references with the space, right? We look at a constant transformation. The cloud is moving permissionless across borders. Represents intangible values, and despite being intangible, it carries a lot of substance, right? Like a cloud can weigh like tons of kilograms, and yet you basically can move through it. It is also culturally a super universal subject, because it represents throughout most of the cultures something very positive, or even a deity. And I think in that perspective, you know, it became for me this perfect symbol. Aside from the personal relationship I already mentioned, it became for me really the symbol for blockchain and cryptocurrency. And what it really embeds as well, if you look at spirituality, is when you discover it, I think when you discover cryptocurrencies for the first time, it's not just about like, you know, a technical exploration. It's really, at least I find, it shakes people really to their core, right? It changes their belief system. For me, I came from, you know, the world of economics aside from art, and there, you know, I was learned like to trust and believe in certain elements, you know, like central banks, and, you know, what is interest for, what is, you know, what are certain elements for. But when I discovered cryptocurrencies, it really challenged the way I saw the world. And I think that is an element which is super interesting, because it's really an exploration of philosophy. It's really an exploration of your core belief systems, you know, which you probably never thought about before. At least I never challenged enough things I was taught, and I was, you know, taught to believe. And I think in that way, people who are into crypto, this belief system is so strong that from people from the outside, it seems like some sort of religion. And I think that is, you know, aside from, you know, this profound experience you have when you travel a lot, you know, I fly almost every second week. And then, you know, the moment when I break through the layer of clouds into the open sky, that is, you know, something which I compare with a very meditative spiritual experience itself. But I think this whole belief system in crypto can be seen as some sort of religion as well. And I think that's a very fun and interesting field to explore and play with.
And Martin, to go a bit deeper on that topic of spirituality that I very much enjoy. So can you tell us why you chose the core music for the Cloud Wallet series?
Yeah, I think I wanted to see, you know, I explained roughly, you know, this kind of like transition, right? The cloud wallet, what it's technically is, where we are today, and where it's going. But I think in the context of identity, it also plays with the role a little bit of posthumanism, right? And futurism, like what is our identity and where is it going, right? And I think you hear sometimes in the space, for instance, this is my forever avatar, or like, you know, we talk about like elements of like legacy, like what is happening basically past our life, right? So are we, what kind of legacy are we leaving? Is a wallet, for instance, also some sort of digital testament of who we were as a person? And I think, you know, these are like extremely interesting elements which might be a little bit more nuanced in the work, but I think are super interesting questions to explore and think about.
Thank you, Martin. I think posthumanism and philosophy in the blockchain is a perfect way to conclude. So for those going to Miami, I really hope that you will have the opportunity to see the solo show by Martin Lukas Ostachowski that will be with Object in partnership with LaCollection during Miami Digital Art Week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for having me.